Hey folks, just wanted to run through a few things today. Starting Unit 3, we're going to be talking about the first 5 presidencies of the United States. And in doing so, we're going to start with obviously the first president, who is George Washington, which most of you should already know that. So the questions that we're going to ask ourselves and hopefully be able to answer by the end of this video is, what are some important events that define George Washington's presidency? And also, what is the difference between a Federalist, which we have heard before, and a Democratic Republican, which is a new political party that we will talk about and discuss today. So just a few things about George Washington and what makes his presidency unique. The first of which is that he is the first president, which is incredibly unique. Being that he is the first one that does this, goes through this whole presidency shtick, he is going to create what is called precedents. First of which is he is unanimously elected. He is chosen by 100% of the electorate. The Electoral College votes on him. No one voted against him. No one ran against him. So in being the first president, he, like I said, is going to create precedents. You create a precedent when you are the first one that does something, and then others afterwards kind of emulate what it is that you do. They imitate the things that you did because you were the first one that did them. A couple of those, first of which is he only ran for 2 terms. He only served for 2 terms as president. That was not a law until much, much later, when there was an amendment passed in the U.S. Constitution that limited the amount of time you could be president to 2 terms. Up until that point, people only did that because Washington was the first one that did that. Washington worked a schedule. He had a work day. There were hours that he worked. There were hours that he didn't work. He wanted to ensure that the people saw that he was the people's servant. He worked for the United States of America, and he worked for the people of the United States of America. Another one is the State of the Union address. He is the first one that does that. All presidents that follow do that. He's the first to give a farewell address. Most other presidents are going to do that as well. So Washington is going to create in his administration, just because he's the first one that does these things, precedents for what it is to be a president. So, the first bit of this that we're going to talk about is going to be some of the domestic issues that Washington is going to face while he is president of the United States. So there's 2 types of issues that you run into when you're talking about national problems. You're going to run into foreign issues, which are obviously issues that happen outside of your country. And then you're going to run into domestic issues, which are things that are going to happen within your country, problems that you have from within. So, as Washington is dealing with all of the things that happen with a new government being created and running into these domestic issues, one of the first bills that are going to pass, it's going to come across Washington's desk and he's going to sign, is going to be the Judiciary Act of 1789. Now, this act is significant for mainly 2 things. First off, it's one of the first acts that are passed by Congress. And what this does, secondly, is that it is going to create the federal court system. It's going to organize the Supreme Courts. It's going to organize the appellate courts, trial courts, circuit courts, federal courts. It's going to essentially create the American judiciary system. The Constitution, as you know in Article 3, says that the Supreme Court is going to be a thing, but it doesn't really give any details to how the federal court system is going to work, what it's going to look like, what its job is supposed to be necessarily. So that is what the Judiciary Act of 1789 is going to do. Another thing that Washington is going to do is he realizes the fact that he is not the most intelligent person in the world. In fact, Washington was not ever formally educated like a lot of his peers were. He didn't go to any sort of formal school. He had reading and writing training. He knew no foreign languages. So at the end of the day, he realizes, because he can look around and see all these vastly intelligent individuals, that he is not the smartest person in the room. So because of that, he is going to organize a group that is called the Cabinet. And all that a cabinet is it is just a group of advisors that are going to help the president out. The president is going to take all the different parts of his particular branch of government, the executive branch, and he's going to put someone at the head of each of those parts. Specifically, we're going to talk about 4 and then focus in on 2, is the Treasury, the State Department, the War Department, and then the Justice Departments. So you have Washington, who is the head. He's kind of like the boss. And then each of these individuals are kind of like the managers. They all have to go back to the boss and let him know, hey, this is what's going on, this is what's happening. And the boss has the final say on all of these things. But the managers are the ones that really know what's happening, know the inner workings of these systems, and kind of can give advice as to how each of these systems work. So the least significant of these, the ones that we're not really going to focus on, Henry Knox, who's the Secretary of War, which is pretty self-explanatory. He's going to deal with any sort of conflict, any sort of warfare that's going to happen outside of the United States. If there happens to be a conflict within, Knox is going to be the one that deals with it. Edmund Randolph, who is the Attorney General, think of him almost as like the lawyer of the executive branch. He's going to be the go-between between the Justice Department and the President. And then you have these other two, which are significantly more important because of the conflict that happens between these two individuals. So these two guys are Alexander Hamilton, who is the Secretary of Treasury. His job is to deal essentially with the nation's money. He is going to be the one that passes any sort of tax-based legislation or pushes for any tax-based legislation. He's going to essentially hold the pocketbook of the entire United States. He deals with the money. Thomas Jefferson is the Secretary of State. He is going to deal with the State Department, and he's going to involve himself with issues that involve foreign nations. So he's going to be the advisor to the president on how to deal with other countries. He's going to be the individual that will go out and negotiate with other countries. But their jobs aren't really terribly significant. What is significant is that these two individuals were probably the most influential in Washington's cabinet. They both kind of tugged at Washington's ear for his attention. And on top of that, they both completely disagreed on government and how it should be ran. So, some of the things that they talked about, some of the things that they discussed, some of the things that they believed about government. So you should have a little chart in your notes that has Jefferson and Hamilton with like little word bubbles around them. So as I go through each topic, these go in order. So just write the opposing viewpoints in those particular bubbles. So, first off, first question. Should power be in the hands of the elite or the common man? Hamilton believed that power should be in the hands of the elite. He believed that only those that were well educated, that were well off and successful in life, could at the end of the day make the best decisions for the people. He believed that everyone is kind of dumb and violent and uneducated, and so they can't make competent, decent decisions. Jefferson, on the other hand, believed that the common man could be trusted. He believed that corruption comes from the top. He believes that it comes from those that have. At the end of the day, he believed that the common man, the vast majority of people, make good decisions and can be trusted. So, Hamilton liked the elites. They should have the power. Jefferson believed the common man should have the power. Next, which government should be stronger, the national government or the states? Hamilton was very much about the national government, it having as much power as possible. He learned from the mistakes of the Articles of Confederation, and so as a result wants to ensure that we don't have that problem again, and therefore wants to make sure we have a stronger federal or national government. Jefferson, opposite viewpoint. Jefferson believed that, yes, the national government does need to have a little bit more power than it did under the Articles. But at the end of the day, he believes that state government should be more powerful than the national government. He said the national government should be kept as small as possible because the national government would just be way too big. How would you as an individual be able to have your issues addressed by such a large government that governs over millions of people? He said it makes much more sense for state governments to be the ones that can make the big decisions because the state governments are going to be the ones that make decisions that affect you most and more directly. What was their view on the Constitution? Alexander Hamilton believed that the Constitution was very kind of loose, that it was set there, but it wasn't set in stone. So, for example, if the Constitution said that you could do something, that 100% means that you can do it with no problem whatsoever. However, if the Constitution doesn't specifically say that you can't do something, that also means that you can do it as well. Hamilton believed that so long as there's nothing in the Constitution that says that you are not specifically allowed to do something, then it was all allowable. It's kind of a looser interpretation of the Constitution. If there's not a rule against it, then I guess I can do it. Thomas Jefferson, on the other hand, was very strict. He said that the Constitution was written the way that it should, and powers that were put into it were put in there for a specific reason, because these are powers that the government is allowed, and that's it. So he would look through the Constitution if someone asked, hey, can I do this? Jefferson would look through it and go, well, it doesn't say that you can do that, so I'm going to go ahead and say that you are not allowed to. Whereas Hamilton, going back to him, with his loose interpretation, would say, there's nothing in the Constitution that says that I can't do this specific thing, so that means that I can do it. What were the core ideas of each of these parties? So Hamilton's political party is going to be the Federalist Party, and once again they believe in a strong national government, just like Hamilton does, and fewer states' rights. Jefferson is going to be the head of the Democratic Republican Party, also known as the Jeffersonian Republicans. You might see that listed as that sometimes. And they believe in a limited national government, a small national government with more rights and more power given to the states. Lastly, what should the focus of the American economy be? What's going to be best for the economy of the United States? Hamilton believed that it should be banking, and it should also be trade. The United States should become independent and self-sufficient. It shouldn't have to rely on Great Britain's assistance anymore. So he wants our banks to become powerful and our industry to grow significantly so that we can produce our own goods from our own raw materials and then become a trading empire without depending upon any other European power for any sort of help. Jefferson had kind of a much more simple view on what the American economy looks like. He said that the American economy should be self-sufficient, that everybody would essentially be farmers with their own little plot of land, and you would grow everything that you needed to eat, you would make everything that you needed to live your life, and if you couldn't make those things or you couldn't grow whatever it is that you need, then there would be a small local market that you could go to purchase those goods from other people that sold those goods. So he had a much more egalitarian and a much more agricultural view on things, Jefferson did. Whereas Hamilton had a much more industrious, a much more banking and trade kind of viewpoint on what the American economy would look like. Here's just a chart that goes through all of their different beliefs there in terms of government and how it should be run. For this next little bit, I'm just going to run through on the Edpuzzle, and I'm going to bring up a quotation or just a little blurb of text, and I want you to identify whether that little blurb of text is going to be something that would have come from Hamilton or Jefferson. Okay? So if you need to, just periodically pause as it goes through it before the question pops up, and just pick Hamilton, Federalist, or Jefferson, a Democratic Republican.